My name is Katie Stelzner. I am the solid waste specialist with the City of St. Louis Park. I deal with a lot of different things. One of which is education and outreach for residents of the city. But then I also handle our commercial and multifamily recycling, organics, and waste reduction programs, as well as our zero waste packaging ordinance, amongst other things that come up. And with that, I am going to hand it off to my supervisor, Kayla, who will take on the next slide.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for being here. As Katie mentioned, my name's Kayla Fisher. I'm the solid waste manager for the City of St. Louis Park and excited to be here tonight with you all. I'm glad that you're taking a little bit of time out of your evening to learn more, and hopefully we accomplish that during our time together. Like Katie mentioned, the chat's available if you have questions as we go along, and then we'll open it up at the end for a little more informal question and answer for anything we weren't able to cover during the presentation. But we always like to kind of start out with grounding all of us in why we have the Recycling Champions program to begin with, why we're all here. We created the program back in 2017 because even though we have a strong recycling program, we're actually entering our 39th year of organized collection for recycling. There's always room for improvement. As you know, as consumers, packaging changes over time, and when you go into grocery stores and other stores, the things that you maybe once bought in bottles, boxes, cans, that sort of thing are now appearing in different types of packaging. So things are always changing. There's always room for improvement, and there's new programs that come on board, like our organics program, which started in 2013. So we always want to continue to engage with residents, help them understand what kinds of programs we have available to them to keep things out of the trash, and to engage with you all as residents, to help you learn more and spread knowledge and awareness. Our recycling participation is high, but there's always room for improvement. And especially with organics being still a fairly young program, there's a strong interest in making sure that we keep items out of the organics and out of the recycling that shouldn't be there. We also have a lot of multifamily households. Our city is growing, and a lot of that growth in population is happening in apartment buildings and condos that are not serviced through the city's collection program, and that we have maybe a little bit less engagement with. So we want to make sure that we reach out to residents who are living in both single family and multifamily homes, to make sure they're aware of our programs. We have a lot of events in the city, and there's a lot of potential for collecting recyclables at events. And we oftentimes reach out to our recycling champions for volunteer work to help at sorting stations or help with educating residents. So it's a great program. If you're familiar with Hennepin County's Recycling Ambassadors program, they've recently rebranded the name of their program to be more inclusive. So they're now the Hennepin County Community Recycling Ambassadors. It's a really successful program that's used by other communities in the Twin Cities Metro. And this is kind of a pared down version to make it a little bit more accessible, just a couple of hours to give you an overview of the city's programs and help you share information with people that you know. Next slide. So we also like to kind of talk about who is a recycling champion? What do they do? What's kind of the expectation? And Katie will get to the specifics of what we're kind of asking of you as recycling champions after you go through this training at the end of the presentation. But essentially, we see recycling champions as people like you who are curious, interested in learning more. A lot of those words that we saw in the word cloud at the beginning of the training, people who want to learn more just to educate themselves, and who also want to share that information with people in their circles, with their family, friends, and neighbors. You can go to the next slide. So our overall goals with our programs are obviously to reduce trash. We have a climate action plan that identifies a goal of reducing the amount of garbage that's generated and thrown away in the city, citywide, not just at residential and multifamily homes, but also at commercial buildings. And so it is our goal to continue to strive towards less material going in the garbage. We also have a goal of reaching 50% participation in our organics program by 2030. Right now, we're at 42% participation, so we're moving in the right direction, but we want to continue to make sure that residents are aware that that program's available to you, and we'll be talking a little bit more about our curbside and our drop-off programs in a little bit. And there's always a focus, like I said, on reducing contamination. So we want to make sure that residents understand what's accepted in the recycling and to avoid wish cycling, or the practice of people not being sure if something's accepted, throwing it in and hoping that somebody else figures it out or it makes it to the right place along the way. We also want to make sure that people know what goes in the organics. The accepted materials list for both of those programs does change over time. So making sure that everyone is aware of those changes and aware of where to go to look for acceptable and not accepted items. And then we also want to encourage people to consider reuse. The waste management hierarchy, as it's called, or kind of uh, the best practices for what to do with something when you no longer need it are always to reuse something first before recycling it or throwing it in the garbage. So that's something that we want to promote both through just education, things you can do at home, and through some of our collection events, which we'll get into in a couple of minutes here. So just so everybody knows, I think a lot of people think that when you throw something away, and actually when we sit down with kids in classrooms, we talk about like the fact that there is no away. When we throw our garbage away, it goes somewhere. In Hennepin County and in St. Louis Park in particular, our garbage does not typically go to a landfill. It's delivered directly to Hennepin County's Energy Recovery Center in Minneapolis. You might hear us refer to it as the HERC. And all of that material goes to the Hennepin Energy Recovery Center and is incinerated rather than landfilled. And what we know is that even though we have these great programs that have been in place for a long time, is that people are still throwing away a lot of things that could actually be reused, recycled, or composted. About 25% of what people throw away is food scraps or other compostable material that could go in the organics instead. And then there are certain items that are actually illegal to put in the garbage. So electronics like televisions, laptops, cell phones, those types of things can't go in the garbage. Tires, yard waste is banned from going in the garbage. And then mercury containing items like compact fluorescent bulbs, mercury containing thermometers, and that sort of thing. There are a lot of options out there for residents, both through the single family collection program and for residents living in multifamily buildings to get rid of those items properly. We will touch a little bit later on the Hennepin County's drop-off facilities, but they do have 2 drop-off facilities that take a variety of these things that cannot go in the garbage, like electronics and mercury containing items, chemicals, batteries, that sort of thing, at their drop-off facilities in Brooklyn Park and Bloomington. The city's program does offer some options, especially for residents who generate just small amounts of waste. So we do have a every other week option that's available for residents who have our smallest cart size. So if you have a 30-gallon cart, you're able to switch to an every other week garbage option. And we have some other requirements that are out there on our website and in our program guides, just to make sure that if people have extra garbage, that they're either using our bulk collection program to pay for bulky items that cannot fit in their garbage, or if they have an extra bag here or there from a large event or a clean out of things that can't be reused or recycled, that those items are paid for by using an extra garbage sticker that would go on an extra bag of garbage in order for it to be collected. So we do have some of those requirements out there. If you're curious to learn more, you can check those out on our website. You can go to the next slide. And this is you, Katie. You are still muted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kayla.
Thanks.
Yes. So Kayla talked a little bit about trash, so now I'm going to go into recycling. Yeah, I know this is a big topic, and I know there are probably going to be plenty of questions, but just a reminder, try to keep those until the end. Hopefully we can answer some of them during the presentation, and if not, you will have ample time to ask those. So to start off with, recycling in St. Louis Park for single-family residents in our residential curbside program goes to Waste Management and their materials recovery facility in Northeast Minneapolis. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Waste Management is our current contractor. We are up for a contract right now, so that may be changing in the fall of 2023. But as of right now, that is where your recycling is going. So the first thing to talk about when it comes to recycling is education. So St. Louis Park, we have a lot of guides for our residents in what can and cannot go in the recycling. They're available on our city website. We send them in the mail. You can always also call us with questions. When we're talking about curbside recycling, we really want you all to focus on sticking to what's on that list, so we can avoid the wish cycling that Kayla had mentioned earlier. And another big thing when it comes to sticking to that guide is if you have questions for recycling, it's actually really important that if you doubt whether it's supposed to be recycled, it's better that you actually put it in the trash, because we're really trying to decrease the amount of contamination that's going to those material recovery facilities. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit about things that should not go in your recycling bin. We'll talk a little bit later about the things that can, but I'm going to start with the big things that cannot. So there are a lot of things that can be recycled in your curbside bin, but there are some things that just can't be. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be recycled, but they just can't handle them at the recycling facilities. So as you can see on the slide here, I have 4 examples. I'm going to go through each of them in a little bit more detail. The first one is plastic bags or film, the stretchy film plastic you sometimes get with packages. That is something that can be recycled, but we really do not want it in your curbside cart because of the problems it causes at the recycling facilities. When those plastic bags enter the machines at the material recovery facilities, they actually clog up all of the equipment, and the facilities have to be shut down for hours at a time to pull those out by hand. So that's one thing we definitely don't want in your curbside cart. However, you can bring it to grocery stores or big box chain stores like Cub, Target, Lunds and Byerly's in St. Louis Park. All of those places have collection containers for those bags where they ship them off in bulk to a business that can actually recycle them. And if you're unfamiliar with where those collection containers are in the stores, you can ask an employee and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. The next thing on my list here is batteries. Batteries do not belong in a curbside recycling cart because of the actually fire issues that they can cause at facilities. If you look at the news in the last couple of years, there have been quite a few fires just in the state of Minnesota from lithium-ion batteries. So actually what we ask residents to do to recycle their batteries is bring them to a Hennepin County drop-off facility, like Kale had mentioned earlier, in either Brooklyn Park or Bloomington. And just so you're all aware, I did not put a map on the slide, but in an email I'll send out afterward, I will have a link to those locations. So they'll accept all kinds of batteries there, AA, AAA, lithium-ion, lead acid, and button batteries can all go to those drop-off facilities. Just make sure you don't put them in your curbside recycling cart. Next on the list here is textiles. So I know in the past, some of you may be familiar, the City of St. Louis Park did contract for the collection of textiles. We no longer contract with Simple Recycling because we just couldn't verify where those textiles were going. There are a lot of good options, though, to still get rid of textiles in the state of Minnesota, one of which you can still schedule pickups with Simple Recycling by going to their website. But you can also bring anything that's still wearable that someone else could use to a thrift store or a donation place like Goodwill. Another thing I recommend to people for textiles that just simply can't be worn anymore, you wouldn't want to wear it yourself and you wouldn't want somebody else to wear it either, to actually cut those up into little pieces and use them as rags. But if none of those options will work for you, we don't want them in the recycling. We would prefer those go in the trash, but definitely try to reuse them as much as possible first. Another thing that doesn't belong in your curbside cart, but actually this one's slightly confusing because it can be recycled curbside if you're a single family resident, is scrap metal. With our current contract with Waste Management, we can collect scrap metal in St. Louis Park outside of the cart. So if you have some of that, you can put it in like a paper bag and set it outside of your cart on collection day. That's going to be things like pots and pans. We just don't want that in the bin itself because if that gets dumped at the facility, it could cause serious injury for the workers. You have to remember with recycling that there are humans often hand sorting materials. So just place that stuff outside of your cart. And then lastly on my list here is shredded paper. I know paper seems like it could be recyclable, and it is, just not curbside. I have witnessed myself what happens when shredded paper goes to a materials recovery facility. It looks like confetti coming down from the sky because there are so many little pieces of paper everywhere. So what we've done at the city is we actually have 2 events every year for residents to drop off confidential papers that they want to be shredded. And we contract with a business that can then collect all of those materials in bulk and ship them off to be recycled. So if you want your confidential paper to be recycled, look on the city website for our shredding days. We always have one in the spring and the fall. And then if you have items after this class that you're still confused about and you don't have a chance to call the city, I just wanted to put up here that Hennepin County has a great resource called their Green Disposal Guide, where you can actually type in any material that you don't know what to do with, and it'll tell you where to bring it. Either put it in your trash, your recycling, organics, or a drop-off facility, or potentially reuse as well. Yes, and Kayla mentions, which I'm planning to talk about earlier in the chat, that we ask that people don't bag their recyclables. If you do collect them in a bag, just make sure that you empty them out loose into your cart before putting them in. All right, so now I'm gonna go over a little bit of what is recyclable curbside. After going over all the don'ts, we'll make it a little bit more positive here. So there's just a couple of things in this list. I'm not going to go through all of it that I want to cover beyond what I've already mentioned. When we're talking about recycling curbside, we really want to make sure there's 4 things that I want to cover here. 1, that anything you're putting in your cart is clean and empty, especially if it's like a beverage container or had food in it. Just make sure it's completely empty of all remnants. Give it a quick rinse. It doesn't need to be extensive, and throw it in the recycling bin. We also, just as I just mentioned, and Kayla put in the chat, don't bag your recyclables in plastic bags or paper bags because that can clog up the machinery. And actually at facilities, I've seen if they discover a bunch of recyclables in like a stapled paper bag, they can't open it because they don't know what's going to be in there. So just make sure that things are loose in your cart. Another I guess thing that I hear pretty often from residents is asking me if they should crush their aluminum cans. And I know that used to be some advice that recycling experts, I guess, would give out. But due to differences in the technology used at recycling facilities now, we actually want your aluminum cans to be whole, just like you had them, because it helps the machinery and the robots honestly identify what it is. So don't crush your cans. And then lastly, one pretty common misconception with recycling is paper plates and paper cups. Although they're made of paper and you would think that can be recyclable, actually that stuff belongs in the trash because it usually has a chemical or plastic resin coating on it that they don't want in the recycling stream. So I know with this long list of what can and cannot go in the bin, there's going to be a lot of questions. We will definitely get to those at the end. All right. Now I'm just going to talk about, well, kind of go over what I already mentioned a little bit here and talk about some tricky items. Again, no bags in the recycling. We want you to recycle loose. No batteries or electronics because of the fires they can cause at facilities. And then lastly, no tanglers. That's a wide category that we in the recycling industry use. Essentially, what that means is nothing that can get wrapped around the machinery. So, no plastic bags, no garden hoses, no electronic cords. That stuff can clog up the machinery, and we really, really don't want that in there. And a couple of things that I didn't mention on the slides, but I want to mention really quickly. There are some tricky items that people seem to still have some confusion about, one of which is black plastic. If you've lived anywhere else besides St. Louis Park in the last couple of years, you may have heard that black plastic is not recyclable. Because of our contract and what we've heard from our recycling MRF or materials recovery facility, they do still have the ability to recycle black plastic as long as it's a plastic resin number of 1, 2, or 5. And that little number is when you see on the bottom of a plastic item, the little recycling symbol with the number inside. As long as it's a 1, 2, or 5, it can be recycled in St. Louis Park. And then lastly, a trick with recycling that really helped me when I was first learning the rules of it is if it's anything smaller than your fist, it's not going to make it through the machinery. So anything smaller than your fist should go in the trash. And if you don't like judging based upon that, 3 by 3 inches is another good way to measure. All right, I think that was all. So I will hand it over to Kayla and she can talk about organics.
Thanks, Katie. Great questions that were coming through in the chat. I think we were able to answer most of them either in the chat or as Katie was going through those slides. So feel free to add some more questions. If we don't get to them during the presentation, we'll cover them at the end. If there's something you were still wondering about recycling. We're going to transition now to organics. As I mentioned, the city has had a curbside collection program since 2013. And we started out with less than 1,000 households that were participating. And over the years, the program has really become pretty popular. And we're up to 42% of our single family homes that are able to participate in the program that have signed up. So our organics program, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a collection program for food scraps, certain like food soiled paper items like paper napkins, and then certified compostable products. Those items are collected at the curb in those brown lidded carts that you may have either you have at your home or you've seen in your neighborhood. And they are delivered to a transfer station. And then from there, they go to a commercial composting facility. Those facilities take the food scraps, they mix them with yard waste, grass clippings, and leaves, using a specific recipe of kind of greens and browns. So think of your backyard composting bin if you've ever done backyard composting, but much bigger. And they arrange that material in what's called aerated static piles. So long windrows with a tube underneath that pipes air or oxygen into the pile that helps that whole composting process work and helps the microbes and good bacteria in that pile break the material down into compost. That compost is then brought back to the city at our brush site, and residents are able to use that compost in their lawns or in their flower beds or gardens to help improve soil. Compost is a great way to help increase your soil's ability to hold water, especially during really dry months, and helps it hang on to nutrients so that you have to rely less on commercial fertilizers and that sort of thing. Another side note about compost, the city is really trying to find ways to use compost in city projects. So our engineering department does use compost in our pavement management projects when they're working on redoing streets and underground utilities, when they get all done with those projects and are doing the landscaping and planting seed mix along the boulevards, they are using a soil compost mix to help reestablish vegetation. So just kind of a neat way of how our program kind of comes full circle. But back to our organics program, for those who are participating in our curbside organics program, it is something that's available to all St. Louis Park residents that have city collection service at no additional cost. It's included in your solid waste rates, just like recycling is. The only thing you have to do is contact the city through contacting the utility billing department or going to the city's website and signing up online. The city delivers a cart and a welcome kit that includes a guide and some samples of the certified compostable bags that you need to use to collect your food scraps in. And then you can set that cart out for weekly collection. One other thing to note, those certified compostable bags are actually included in the program, so residents can pick those bags up at City Hall or at the Municipal Service Center on Oxford Street, where we also hold our spring and fall cleanup events. So all of those things are included in the program. Just like Katie mentioned with recycling, this is another program where we really encourage people to only include the things that they know are supposed to go in there. So sticking to the guide. Once that material gets down to the composting facility, it's really challenging for the composters to remove contamination if it's, if it's inside those bags. So I am gonna go over what's accepted in the program on the next slide, but I just wanted to mention for any of you who are new to organics, or you might be talking to friends or neighbors who are interested in signing up but feel a little bit overwhelmed or intimidated by the collection program. One thing that we encourage people to do is start out with just collecting your food scraps. That's really the most valuable material that people are throwing away in their trash now. So if you can just put your food scraps, start collecting that and feel pretty confident about it, then you can move on to some of the other more nuanced things that we accept when you feel comfortable or are ready. I do see a hand up. Is this a question that you're wanting to ask right now, or do you think you can hold it till the end of the um, presentation? Oh, maybe it's just an accidental hand up. But if you do need to ask a question, feel free to come off of mute, Kathleen, or pop it in the chat. So to keep going on organics, one other thing that I like to mention, even though this is a change that happened quite a while ago, the city, when we first started the program, we used to collect organics and yard waste together in the same cart. We transitioned away from that in the beginning of 2019. So from time to time, residents will ask about that. Yard waste is no longer accepted in the organics cart. It does need to be collected separately. All right, Katie, you can go to the next slide. So here's a screenshot of our organics guide. This is something that we send out each year. This year we had it inserted in with the park perspective, with the recycling guide on one side and the organics guide on the other side. This is a great resource that just outlines some of the main items that we accept for organics collection. So all food scraps, including meat, bones, and dairy. I always like to point that out, especially because people who do or have done backyard composting may know that that kind of material does not work in a backyard composting bin. But because our material goes to a commercial composter whose piles heat up at high enough temperatures to be able to break down hard to break down items like eggshells, bones, shellfish from seafood and that sort of thing, as well as any like bad bacteria or pathogens that are in the pile and weed seeds. All of these things can be collected through organics. The food soiled paper that I mentioned, really, we want to limit it to napkins and paper towels that are used in the kitchen. If you're using paper towels and chemicals for cleaning in your house, we don't want those in the organics because of the chemicals that would be included on the paper towel. But if you're using a paper towel for, cleaning up food spills or to clean up as a makeshift napkin, go ahead and include it. Pizza delivery boxes are accepted in the organics, and then paper egg cartons. Paper towel cores are another thing that people ask, or toilet paper rolls, like the leftover roll after you use up paper towels or toilet paper. Those also can be accepted in the organics, and we actually encourage people to put them in the organics rather than the recycling, because all of those items are a low grade paper fiber. They're really not something that the recycling markets really want. It's better to put it in the organics instead. There's some other items listed, like common household items that can be composted, coffee grounds and filters, paper Q-tips that have the paper middle only, cotton balls and swabs, those can also be included. But again, if you're using any sort of chemical, like for removing nail polish or makeup with those items, then we would ask that they go in the trash. One final thing that I want to point out regarding organics is certified compostable products. I'm sure you're seeing more and more of these as you are, out and about going to restaurants or even buying single-use items in the store. The BPI logo that you can see kind of in the center of the screen, it's the same logo that's on all of the certified compostable bags that you use. That is the logo that you need to look for in order to be confident that you can put like a to-go coffee container or a to-go item in the organics. That BPI logo means that that product has been tested by a third party and that it will break down in a composting facility. I see your physical hand raised there. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I apologize, Kayla, for the confusion early on. Yes, I do have a question.
No worries.
Thanks. I must first say I am so excited about the composting program. It's been wonderful. Just love this city. This city is just amazing in the way of our waste management. But question, we have cats, and we are, and I apologize if I did not hear your answer earlier, if you address this, but in the way of cleaning foil, cleaning cat tins, all that. What is the guideline there?
So are you talking about like cat food versus cleaning litter boxes?
No, cat food, yes.
Okay. So I would say cat food, dog food, pet food that is gone bad or spoiled, that's okay to put in the organics. So if there's spoiled food that your pet hasn't eaten, that could go in the organics. Anything that, on the other end of the consumption process, so pet waste, pet litter, even if you will see some pet waste bags out there that are certified compostable. Compost facilities in Minnesota do not want pet waste or kitty litter, even if it says on the box that it's compostable. And that's because of the permitting requirements that they have with the state of Minnesota. So pet waste is something that would still need to go in the trash. So good question, clarification.
Sorry, Keila. I was asking about cat food tins.
You're talking about recycling. Oh, the tins itself?
Recycling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, if those are cleaned out, those could go in the recycling.
So they need to
Yes.
be clean.
I mean, they don't need to be spotless, but if they're empty, if you're able to give them a good rinse, same thing with tuna cans, then those could go in the recycling. They could be accepted because they're made out of aluminum.
And aluminum foil?
Aluminum foil is the same thing as long as it's clean. It would need to be balled up so it meets that 3x3. If you're just putting in a sheet of aluminum foil, it's going to end up getting mixed in with the paper and cardboard and that sort of thing. So yes, that is recyclable. So I know that there are questions that we haven't been able to answer yet. I'm going to keep moving through the presentation and then we'll open it up for just more of a informal question and answer on recycling or organics after we get through a few more slides, okay? Okay, I am going to, Cindy, I saw your hand up. Thanks for going on mute. I promise we'll give you an opportunity at the end of the presentation. So on this slide, we just wanted to see, help you see that there are also resources on the city's website for the organics program. So in addition to being able to sign up for organics on the city's website, you can also view a list of accepted materials. It pretty much follows the same list that you would see on the guide that was inserted in the park perspective and sent out. But it's a good place to always check and remind yourself. We are able to obviously update this website if things change, and it's a good reminder to take a look at that. It's hard to see in this slide, but when you go to the acceptable materials page, there's also a detailed yes/no list. So if you're really interested in digging into the details and looking for a specific item, you can go there, or you can contact us. Our email is also included on the website, so you can send us a question or a picture of an item, and we're happy to help you out. Okay, next slide, Katie. All right, this picture is to scare everyone. Just kidding, but seriously, this is stuff that we have pulled out of a load of organics in the past when we've done sorts. St. Louis Park, I think you can all be proud. We have a great program. We have really limited contamination. When we've done studies in the past, we found that only 1.5% of total organics collected is actually contamination, items that shouldn't be in there. So some of the things that are most common are freezer boxes. Those are not accepted in organics. If you can believe it, early on in programs in the state of Minnesota, these were something that composters were allowing, but they quickly learned that those freezer boxes have material in it that can't fully be composted. So freezer boxes need to go in the trash. To-go coffee cups and food containers, even if they look like they're just paper and they don't have a shiny coating, there's no way to be certain that those items are compostable unless you can see that BPI certified logo on it, or you can ask the restaurant if they can confirm that they're using certified compostable products. Coffee cups are a super easy thing to be able to tell if they're compostable or not. If they are, they're going to have that BPI logo stamped on the side. Especially in St. Louis Park, you will see that at coffee shops. So look for that. Food, oftentimes we will find that when we're doing our sorts, that someone will have a bag of spoiled produce, but instead of removing it from the bag, they'll include the packaging as well. So if that happens to you, just make sure that you remove that, plastic bag or other packaging before you put that spoiled produce in the organics. A trash bag might end up in a cart every once in a while, especially if you have alley collection and you find that is happening. We just recommend that you keep your organics cart either stored in your garage or less accessible so that that doesn't happen by accident by someone passing by and using your cart as a disposal option. So those are just some of the main contaminants that we see and like to remind people not to include. Lastly, yard waste. As I mentioned, that's something that can't go in the trash. That's a state law, and the state law also requires that yard waste is collected in compostable bags. So if if you have used in the past black plastic trash bags, you can't put your yard waste in that for collection. It won't be collected. Yard waste is collected currently April through November on a weekly basis. We certainly had some disruptions in yard waste collection specifically over the last 2 years. And to kind of help with some of those disruptions, we expanded the option to be able to self-haul yard waste to the city's brush site at the intersection of Cedar Lake Road and Colorado Avenue South over on the north end of the city. So you are able to bring brush, branches, and logs that are too big for curbside collection and yard waste like grass clippings and leaves to the city's yard waste site. One thing that we're really trying to encourage residents to do is instead of bagging grass clippings or even bagging leaves, to regularly mulch that material just back onto your lawn. That's a great way to reduce the amount of material that has to be collected at the curb and delivered to a composting facility. We have some more information on mulching your grass clippings and leaves on our yard waste website. And all of our yard waste does go down to a commercial composting facility in Empire Township outside of the city of Rosemont, and it's operated by Specialized Environmental Technologies, or the mulch store. So if you've ever been to to the city's brush site and picked up compost, you might have noticed a small sign that says the compost is provided by the mulch store. That's the same company that also composts our organics and yard waste. I did see there's a question on sod and grass. So grass clippings can go in the organics. If you have sod or grass, there are certain yard waste facilities that will take that material directly. It's typically a direct haul situation. It's not collected at the curb just because of weight restrictions and yard waste collection at the curb. We don't allow any soil. So if you go to the Hennepin County's Green Disposal Guide, you should be able to search that option and find a couple of options for delivering that material, or you can give us a call if you have a specific need.
All right. Thanks, Kayla. I know there have been a lot of questions in the chat, and I know we haven't been able to answer them all. I promise we will get to them at the end if we missed yours. So we will make sure to answer all of those. And like I said, if we forget, just give us a nice reminder and we'll make sure we get it answered. So for right now, I'm going to do a little quiz for you all. And actually what I'm going to ask is that you just think about this on your own and write down the answer. And then I'm just going to talk about what the correct answer is and explain why. So the first thing, essentially what I'm asking you all to do is say whether these 3 items belong in the trash, recycling, or organics. So the first one on the left-hand side here is a coffee cup. And I just want you to think about it for a second and write down where you think it belongs. A to-go coffee cup, I should say. The middle one is a number 5 black plastic container. And then the one on the far right are paper plates. So just take a couple minutes for yourself. You don't have to write it down if you're just going to remember of where you think these things belong. Just give me a couple seconds to think about it, and then I will explain. And the only reason I'm going to have you not put it in the chat is because I don't want it to get lost amongst all the questions to get lost amongst all the answers. All right, so I'll go over the first one here. So this one on the left-hand side is a to-go coffee cup. And the big hint here to indicate where it belongs, as Kayla just went over, is at the very bottom of the cup there, you can see the BPI certified compostable label. So when you're at a coffee shop, this is the label you want to look for to determine where this cup can go. Since it's certified compostable, it can go in an organic bin. If you don't see that label on a cup, you should place it in the trash. These never belong in the recycling. Well, rarely do they belong in the recycling unless it's one of the cold cups instead of a hot one. And then in the middle here, we have a number 5 black plastic container. This one can trick up some people in the past, so I just want to be very clear because this is a number 5 plastic, which is recyclable in St. Louis Park. Just because it's black does not mean it can't go in the recycling. In St. Louis Park for right now, you can recycle black plastic. That may change in the future, and if that happens, we'll be sure to put out educational information, but it won't be changing anytime soon. So for now, keep putting those in your cart. And then on the right-hand side is the paper plates. This is one that a lot of people get confused about because they're paper. They assume that they can go in the recycling cart. But since these actually have printing on them and you can kind of tell they're a little shiny, they have a plastic resin coating on them. These are not recyclable, nor are they compostable. So they actually do belong in the trash. And I know there's probably going to be a question about there are some paper plates that are certified compostable. But in order to put them in the organics, you do want to make sure you can find that certification. So yeah, these in this picture would belong in the trash. All right. And I'm going to let Kayla talk about reuse.
All right, sounds good. For those of you that feel super tech savvy and can see the little react button at the top of the Teams window, if you're able to like give a smiley face or a thumbs up if you think that you got most or all of those questions right, feel free to go ahead. Give us a little feedback that way. And maybe the wow if you got them all wrong. Okay, great. It looks like most of you did. We kind of gave you some of the answers as we were going along. So as I mentioned, we also want to promote up the waste hierarchy. Reuse is something that is really important, and it's one of the best ways to help reduce the impact on, on garbage and help reduce the need for things to be collected at the curb. So some of the ways that we support reuse in St. Louis Park are through our swap events. We've been doing these for several years. And the great thing about these events is that, they're not just limited to St. Louis Park residents. So if you know people who would be interested in attending these events who live outside of the city, please share them. We would love to have them come. But essentially, these 3 swaps that occur over the spring, summer, and fall months are great ways for people to bring items that they no longer want or need and drop them off, and then hopefully take a few things with them that are new to them. The gardening swap is, like you would imagine, gardening tools and decorations. We do allow people to bring seedlings or indoor potted plants to swap, but we no longer allow people to bring with perennials or plants that they've dug out of their garden, and that is because we are trying to limit the potential spread of jumping worms, which are an invasive organism that lives that can be found in the soil and can be transferred around. So we have more information about jumping worms typically at that gardening swap. So you're welcome to come and learn more about it. And the clothing swap is just what it sounds: clothing, shoes, accessories for all ages, for anyone. Bring those to the clothing swap and take a whole bunch of clothing with you. The media swap is meant for books, CDs, DVDs, games, puzzles. It's a fun way to be able to bring in things that you're not interested in anymore and take something away. And for all of these events, we have details on the hours and items that you can bring. on our website at stlouisparkmn.gov/reuse. So that link will be shared after the training so you can learn more. The county also holds Fix-It clinics, and we're really excited because it's something that had been on hiatus during the pandemic and they've started back up. So they have a Fix-It clinic coming up next month, March 11th at the Ridgedale Library. They do also have Fix-It clinics occasionally in St. Louis Park as well, so just keep an eye out for that. But if you have something that needs repair, like a lamp or a toaster, or I believe they even have menders on site, or information about that. So you can bring it and get it fixed and maybe learn a new skill along the way too. Another great way to keep items out of the trash. And we also maintain a local reuse directory that's on that website. So for St. Louis Park organizations that provide repair or reuse services, rental services, we have a list of those. And if you're aware of any that we don't have on that list, please feel free to reach out and let us know. We'll look into it and get them added.
And sorry, Kayla, I'm just going to jump in here for a second. I did see that looks like the URL went to a 404 page. I will be sure in an email I send out after this training to include the correct link for that. Yeah.
Sounds good. I'll drop it in the chat too, Katie.
My apologies, Kayla. Just waiting until that ended. So yes, we are going to talk about multifamily a little bit. Spent a lot of time talking about the single family residential collection program, which is very important. But I know we do have some multifamily residents here, so we want to make sure we cover that as well. So, for those of you, well, for everyone really, just to have background knowledge, multifamily properties in the city of St. Louis Park are required to offer trash and recycling services for their residents. We do have a city ordinance outlining that. Those ordinance requirements are that gets into the weeds a little bit. I'll explain it a little bit more later, but that property managers offer a minimum of 20 gallons of recycling per dwelling unit per week. Essentially, what that equates to is if you live in, like, let's say a 20-unit apartment building, your property manager is required to have 2 cubic yards of recycling for you. So a 2 cubic yard dumpster for everyone to use. And then the other requirements in that ordinance are that the collection must always be co-collected. So what that usually looks like is if you live in, let's say, an apartment building, you're going to have a trash and recycling dumpster at the back of the building or maybe in the parking garage right next to each other. And then they also do have an education requirement through that ordinance that property managers or HOAs or boards are required annually to educate their residents on recycling and trash and what goes where and make sure they put it in the correct place. That's annually and at move-in. So those are the requirements for multifamily properties in the city. And then we also partner with Hennepin County to offer resources to do outreach and education with multifamily properties and residents because Hennepin County has a really robust multifamily program. They offer a lot of free resources like signage, recycling guides, organics guides, similar to what we offer at the city, and then totes. Especially if you live in an apartment building that has like 8 floors and you have to bring your recycling all the way down to the bottom. Hennepin County has some totes to make that a little bit easier. So we do partner with them to get education out there and then refer a lot of multifamily property managers to the county for that reason. And then in regards to organics, because the city of St. Louis Park does not have curbside organics collection for our multifamily residents at this time, the city has decided to try to make it as accessible as possible. So we do offer free drop sites for multifamily residents throughout the city. Right now we have 11 of them. 6 were just added in the last year. And we really did try to place them in different parts of the city so that no one would have to transport anything too far to access one of those drop sites. They're free for multifamily residents and they're located near very like high density multifamily areas. So we could try to reach a lot of residents that way. If you have any questions about that, you can always ask me, or there's lots of information on the city website, as well as the link to sign up for that free program. And it's very simple. All you have to do is fill out a form. We ask for your name, address, phone number, email, and then you get the code to unlock the cards because they are locked to try to prevent contamination. And I should add, the picture on the screen here is an image of one of the drop sites. Although since that image was taken, we have now added some signs with QR codes to help people learn more about it and hopefully get some more signups. And then lastly, with multifamily, I do want to mention that specifically if you live in a multifamily property and you're interested in getting on-site collection, that's not something that we currently offer through the city. However, you can contact me if you are interested, and I will connect you with resources to try to get that started. The first thing I recommend to multifamily residents who are interested in on-site organics collection is to talk to your property manager or your HOA or your board to try to find out who your current trash and recycling hauler is and find out if they offer organics collection, and then make sure that you can get the powers that be or those who make decisions to agree to start up the program. And then at that point, I would most likely connect you with Hennepin County since they offer grant assistance in setting up those programs. And if there are any other questions about multifamily recycling or organics, I can address those at the end as well. Apologize here, my screen. There we go. Okay. Next, I am going to talk about a little bit about the zero waste packaging ordinance. So I know we've mentioned this briefly in a couple of different slides here, but if you're unfamiliar, the City of St. Louis Park does have a zero waste packaging ordinance, which went into effect in 2017. And the main idea behind passing this ordinance was to reduce the amount of trash that's being generated in the city. So what the zero waste packaging ordinance does is requires all food establishments in the city to use recyclable or compostable food packaging products for their to-go items. So things like coffee cups or the containers that you use to bring home leftovers from dinner should be recyclable or compostable. In a little bit more detail, the recyclable items should be either plastics 1, 2, or 5, or metal or aluminum containers, or paper, which wasn't included on the slide, but that would comply as well. And then the compostable products must be BPI certified, which I know Kayla has already talked about in some detail. And then in, I believe it was 2019, there was an amendment to the ordinance to require food establishments to also only offer straws upon request. So you still can get a straw at a restaurant in St. Louis Park, but you do have to ask for it. And that again is just to try to reduce the amount of trash and plastic that is being generated throughout the city. In addition to the food packaging requirements in that ordinance, property managers, businesses in the city are also required to have organics collection if they are offering compostable products to their patrons. So for example, in the case of a restaurant, if they are promoting compostable products and that's what they're using to comply with this ordinance, if they're giving away compostable products to their patrons, they also have to have a place for the patrons to put those products. So restaurants are required to have both back of house and front of house, which is an industry way to say like in the kitchen and where like customers are coming in, recycling and organics collection. And then I do want to mention just briefly, we do offer assistance to restaurants and food establishments complying with this ordinance, technical assistance. Actually, recently, Kayla and I started going around to all of the restaurants and helping them come into compliance with the ordinance, checking to make sure that their products are either recyclable or compostable, and if they're not, giving them the resources that they need to find those products. So we do offer assistance. And if you come across a restaurant that isn't in compliance with that ordinance, just shoot me an email and I will follow up with them and make sure that we can get them to come into compliance. The last thing I want to mention in regards to the zero waste packaging ordinance, and I know Kayla touched on this briefly, although we do have this requirement in the city, don't assume that all of the products are going to be compostable if they look like they should be. We really want to make sure that you look for that BPI logo on anything so that we're making sure things are going in their correct place. And then I will let Kayla talk about education.
Thanks, Katie. So we just want you to be aware, especially if you are going to be that person talking to your neighbors or helping out at events, there are ways that we try to be proactive and get information out to residents in addition to holding trainings like these. So each year we'll mail out a solid waste guide. Show you an example. So if those of you who can see me speaking on the screen, we have this booklet that we mailed out in 22. That includes all of the details of the city's residential collection program. We mail out a recycling and organics guide, typically either inserted in the park perspective or actually printed on the back page of the perspective. This year we did do an insert, and so that's a recycling guide on one side, organics on the other. That's a great thing to hang on to, or go to our website for more information. For our curbside collection program, we do use educational tags that we require our hauler to place on the cart if you happened to have accidentally bagged your recyclables or included, a big styrofoam block from a new TV that you got over the holiday season. Those items can't be included in your recycling. So one of the ways that we try to do education at the curb is through those tags. And you can see an example of one of those tags hanging on a cart in the slide. We do post information on social media and send out emails. For those of you with curbside collection, if you want to be informed that it's your recycling week and get some current updates, you can sign up for our recycling reminders email. And if you're interested in that, you can go to the city's webpage and then click on the garbage and recycling icon, and that will take you to our homepage where a lot of the resources that we've talked today for signing up for programs or email notifications can be accessed on that main page. If you're really interested in sitting down with a bowl of popcorn and watching all of our past educational videos and some of the content from our friends in the sustainability division, there is an environmental stewardship playlist on the city's YouTube channel that you can take a look at. And then we're out tabling at events. So you will see us at Parktacular, at the fire station open house, as well as other events around the city. If you have an event going on in your neighborhood or with one of your community groups in St. Louis Park, and you're interested in having somebody join you there to talk about recycling, you can let us know. We'd also be happy to, and Katie, I am kind of stepping on your toes on a later slide, but we'd also be happy to equip you to do the same thing. We have had recycling champions in the past go and talk to either their neighborhood groups or to a group of people at a nearby apartment complex or their HOA. So there's lots of ways to get involved yourself as well.
I started talking once again without unmuting myself. Thanks, Kayla. I am going to briefly mention when we're talking a little bit about education and engagement, a relatively new program that the county has started actually, centered around waste reduction. It's the Hennepin County Plastic Free Challenge. And the reason I wanted to bring this up in particular during this training is because the challenge is actually happening right now. And you all still can sign up if you are interested. There is no deadline, so you're still welcome to do so. And I know I didn't include the link on this slide, but I will be sending it out via email after this training. So I'll make sure that you all have access to that if you're interested. But essentially what the Plastic Free Challenge is pretty self-explanatory. They're trying to encourage residents to reduce their use of plastic and like a system-wide level. So I included some screenshots because I actually signed up for the challenge myself last year of kind of what it looks like. So Hennepin County offers a lot of resources to help you do this. They have different action steps you can take to help keep track of it and help keep yourself engaged. I know these are kind of hard to read on the slide, but they have different actions for you at home, on the go, with food, with your kids, with personal care. So really, they try to cater it to what the individual wants to do, so they can make sure it's something achievable and it's not too much. They don't have like a specific number of actions you have to take. You can pick and choose whichever you prefer. On the left-hand side here, I think this was an image of some actions you can do at home. They try to make it very easy and very simple. I decided to click the learn more button on watch a documentary. So they even have links to like different documentaries you can watch, or examples of how you can ditch your plastic dry cleaning bags, or reducing plastic use with your caffeine intake, which I know many people could probably use. So just some examples of things you could do. One thing I did want to ask with this slide to try to hopefully crowdsource some excitement and some ideas is if you could put in the chat just one way that you've reduced plastic use in your own life, so we can hopefully learn from each other, essentially. I'll throw one in there too that I've done as well. But yeah, just take a couple seconds to think about that and throw one in the chat. And thank you, Kayla, for including the link in the chat. All right. Well, while all of those lovely suggestions are coming in, and be sure to read them. Every time I get suggestions from this class, I learn something new, so it's very helpful. I am going to talk a little bit about the time commitment and opportunities of being a recycling champion. So in the past, we've asked all of our recycling champions to go out into the community and share their knowledge and learn, essentially become advocates for waste reduction in the city of St. Louis Park, which we really do want you to continue to do in 2023. But in addition to that, this year we are asking that as a recycling champion, you commit to volunteering at one event throughout the entire year that the city needs help at, or that maybe your neighborhood association could use recycling assistance with. And we're asking that you report those volunteer hours on the city website under our Recycling Champion Resources page. And actually, at the end of the presentation, I will pull up that page so that you all can see what it looks like, because it's a hidden link on the city website that you as recycling champions will have access to, but we do not allow the general public to see. So essentially, yes, we're asking you to commit to volunteering at one event. And to make that process easier, this year, I have decided to create a sign-up genius for those of you who are familiar with that platform. It's actually a very easy way to list a bunch of events, what you need, the time commitment, the date, essentially a way to keep things more organized. Because if you are a recycling champion that has taken this class a few times, you may be aware that in the past, when the city has volunteer needs, we just send out mass emails. So to try to reduce the amount of emails going out this year, I am working on creating that sign up genius so that I can just send you one email for the whole year and you can sign up for whatever shifts you're available for. And I am trying to keep the shifts limited to 2 to 3 hours at the most. So you're not committing like your whole day to an event unless you really want to. And I have had people who do that and I love those people, but you don't have to. They're going to be 2 to 3 hour shifts for various events. So things like Parktacular, as Kayla mentioned, like the fire station open house, our swap events. We need volunteers for all of those to make them happen. We really appreciate it. You're going to be doing a variety of things depending on the event. So we need volunteers to help us set up and take down. We need volunteers to help people sort things correctly. Yeah, it's a variety of different things. And on the Sign Up Genius, I will have all of that detailed. And I will send out that link as soon as possible. The only reason I don't have it ready for you tonight is because I'm waiting on some of the events to finalize their dates for 2023. So as soon as that happens, I will send that out to all of you and you can sign up as you are able. And if you don't want to volunteer at a city event, I understand that, and that's okay too. Kayla did mention this a little bit briefly. There are other ways that you can volunteer and share the information in the community by like talking to your neighbors at parties from your neighborhood association, maybe a national night out, presenting to clubs or sports teams, your place of worship, condo associations, or apartments, maybe at your workplace. Essentially, we just want to make sure that you share the knowledge you gained today so that we can create a more waste-free community here in St. Louis Park. And if there are questions about that too, I can answer those at the end. All right, and then lastly, I do just want to mention briefly the resources that we have available to you as recycling champions. One of which I already mentioned. We do have a ton of resources available on our website, and Kayla shared the link to that in the chat, and I will send it via email either tomorrow or early next week. We also have a Facebook group, which is member created and member led. So it's actually not something that the city manages. So if you're interested in joining that group, you can search for it on Facebook. And I'm going to let the moderator know that we completed this class tonight and that she might be getting an influx of requests. So when you request to join that group, just mention in your request that you took the Recycling Champions class this February, and you will be allowed to join that. Kayla, I believe, is a member, so she can speak to that a little bit more about what goes on in that group. But I'll finish going through the list there, and then Kayla, I'll let you jump in. We also do have resource kits that you can check out if you are volunteering at an event. Things like, recycling games of essentially a bunch of items that either go in the recycling, trash, or organics. That's very popular with kids. We also have examples of compostable items that you could use to talk about zero waste packaging, lots of different things. If you're interested in those, send either Kayla or I an email and we'll get you connected and set up with that. I already mentioned the Hennepin County Plastic Free Challenge. And then lastly on the list here are tours and social gatherings. And those have kind of been on pause because of the pandemic the last few years. I'm actually kind of optimistic that in the next year, maybe 2 years, that we can get those up and running again. And as recycling champions, we will make sure that you are on the list if any tours or social events are scheduled. So with that, that is actually the end of our training portion of the presentation. So thank you all for being here. I know it was a lot of information and long, and I know there are a lot of questions we have yet to answer. So yeah, we can get started with those. Yeah, Kayla, feel free to add anything if you wanted to on those last couple slides.
I think you did a great job. I think that we could just transition into the questions, and you all can feel free to continue to add questions to the chat. Charlie helped kind of track some of the questions that we weren't able to address yet. There's a few of them that he sent separately to us, Katie, so I can start addressing those really quickly. One of the questions that came up regarding recycling was whether or not the plastic window on envelopes, so like, letters that you get in the mail, bills that you get in the mail that have the little window for the address, those do not need to be removed before you throw them in the recycling. So junk mail and those envelopes with the plastic windows can be included. Let's see here. There's a question about whether or not separating metal tops from glass jars is necessary. I always recommend that you can keep those on the glass jars. Essentially, what happens is glass jars that go through the recycling process at the material recovery facilities